Yeah, no, I want to talk to you about that meme. It's great with the two people sitting back to back and their inner child inside.
Yeah.
And then it was interesting in that meme because the two children were the ones that were connecting to each other, but the adults weren't.
Right.
But what I have found in my experiences is that the adult is not connecting to their own inner child.
Right.
And there's a resistance to that as well. And that's what we're working with, is that resistance to them connecting to that child again. Because this is what happens is like, oh, I've done so much growth. I've done so much growth. And that child was the one that was traumatized, but I've done so much growth. So they don't want to go back and reconnect.
Yeah.
So that's what, and I forgot, because you came up with a really good word for this, and this is why I wanted to talk to you, because instead of disassociation, you came up with something different. I know I added it into the 2.5 PowerPoint, but can you remember what it was?
Um,
Because I haven't gone back to open up the 2.5
yeah,
to see. I'll have to look, because I know I wrote it down because I was like, I'll forget if I don't. But it worked out so perfectly. Because I just did a session, and the person has done a lot of growth, and all of the sessions have been about that traumatized child. But now they're learning to be an adult. And they went to a therapist, and the therapist was pushing them to go back to that child. And when it came time for me to do my session, I could see the anger in the person I was working on. And the person could not connect to that anger. They're like, no, I'm not angry. I'm not angry. I'm like, but you are. And it was really interesting because they kept pushing back on me, and I'm like, I'm kind of standing firm on this one because it's there. I can see it. I can feel it. And
Did you
about 40.
assess why they couldn't feel or see the anger within themselves?
Well, that was the interesting part. So about 45 minutes into the session, they finally connected to their inner child again. I go, and I made it very clear with them, and I think this was important. I made it very clear with them. I am not interested in taking you back to that spot and spend time there. We're just going to go back, connect real quick, and then we're going to come right back to an adult because I want to work with the adult.
Right.
And that took the pressure off, right? Because the other therapist was forcing them to go meet that child, do whatever with this child. And I was like, I'm not going to do that because I saw the anger that they were going through by being forced to do so.
Right. Interesting.
So once I made it clear what I was doing and what I was trying to do, about 45 minutes into the session, they went, you know, Joel, so they're like, I was resisting you that whole time because I wasn't connecting to it. But you could see it. I couldn't see it. I'm like, well, that's, the advantage, right? Because you can't really see yourself.
Yeah.
And they're like, thank you for taking me here, but also for sharing that you weren't going to keep me there. You were going to bring me back to the adult.
Right.
And I think that's a big issue.
It's like almost like exposure therapy in a way. So like what I'm realizing is like, if there's something you're afraid of or timid of or something like that, you just do it a little bit. You don't have to do it a bunch, right? Just a little bit by little bit by little bit by little bit. And you can increase, maybe the intensity of it or the duration of it each little time. But over time, then you become acclimated to it.
And more resilient, right?
Right.
Because you're building.
That situation, like, you might have just brought him back to the inner child just for a second, then brought him back.
Mm-hmm.
Just to see. Okay, you saw it, boom, now we're back.
You're right.
And then now next time, maybe now you'll see it for 30 seconds, but then bring him back, and then slowly build from there, kind of.
Yeah, that's a great point because you don't want to just throw them in the deep end of the ocean, right, with no life preserver.
Right.
That's scary.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And then too, they've done so much work. Well, why do I have to go back? Because I've done so much work. I don't want to go back and connect with that.
Yeah.
So they were trying to do it from here. And at about 45 minutes into the session, they finally connected to what that child was feeling. I was like,
Right.
that's what we're looking for. That's all
Yeah.
you needed to experience is what that child was feeling so you could feel it.
And also like what like kind of what we talked about before, and like when you go into kind of the neuroscience of it a little bit, it's like they were trying to use that whole thinking part when they were already out of that. They were already in the fight, flight, fear, and
Yeah.
get angry. They're in that fighting state, right?
Right. Right.
So it's like they have to breathe or do something or whatever it may be to get out of that. So in that situation, it's going to be fascinating because that anger came up, you know?
Right.
And it was like, if you had a punching bag or a pillow or something there to be like, you know what? If they're ready to release that anger, let it go on that bag or something.
Right. But what was interesting was they couldn't connect to that anger at all. Right. They wouldn't even go there to try to even connect to it.
See, that would be really fascinating because they couldn't connect to it because we're talking to them, right? But it's like if they started to maybe, I don't know, if they hit one time, two times, and all of a sudden now they might start feeling that anger, and then it would just be a very
kind of what we did was we had them move from the position that they were in to move to a different location, but we also asked them like, how do you express anger? Like, do you write? Do you what is it that you do to when you are angry to express it? So instead of just giving them something physical, because for them it was writing. So that's the physical aspect of that, is to actually write. Yeah. So found out like what they use and incorporated that in. Yeah. You know, because you and I, we're very physical, so we, punching something might work,
Right.
But for them, it didn't.
Or just the expression of anger, like that's just really what it comes down to. Like,
right.
It's just like anger gets a bad rep, but it's just
But what was really interesting was, and this is why she was having a hard time connecting to it. It wasn't her adult anger; it was the child's anger.
Yeah.
And so once she realized, oh, yeah, this isn't my anger. It is her anger, but it's not her adult anger. She was able to connect to that child and their anger. Cool. And I was like, that's what we were looking for. Now we can come back.
Yeah. So then she can change her perception of it or whatever it may be.
Right. It was just fascinating a session because it was like really, it made me work really hard because I'm like, it's anger, but it's not hers. Like, where is this coming from? And that's when we ended up going and finding out it was the child's. But she really had resistance to go back and connect to that child because the therapist kept pushing them to go back in their previous session.
Yeah.
And forcing it, enforcing it. Yeah.
The therapists, they're very, very fascinating.
Yeah, they are.
They kind of want to do it their way, and they don't really 100% listen, So it's very fascinating.
Right, because you've had some experience with that, haven't you?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Like there's things. And see what's the most interesting thing, like, so I'll share this with you, is that so recently, like, because fearful of death has been like my biggest thing, right? Like, can't get death off my mind, whatever. And it was so interesting because I had this download this morning, and not a single person asked me, well, what is it in your life that you feel you're doing to bring you to death? And I was like, oh, shit. Interesting.
Now, is that a question you came up with for yourself?
Yeah, that's what I started having realization because with the anxiety and with all the panic and all that, right? So the exposure type therapy. So like cannabis was serving its purpose a little bit here and there. But what sucks is smoke. Doesn't matter what it is, right?
Right.
So cough, this, that, the other. And that's where my thought process was like, you're not healthy now. This is going to cause you long-term issues, which always brought the death thing on.
So the coughing would trigger the death thing.
Yeah, exactly. So like
Interesting. Yeah.
coughing, breathing, how it's not healthy for you, you know,
Right.
side effect, long term, how this is gonna like, because you can't lie to yourself. You can lie to everybody else.
Right.
Deep down, you know you're not lying to yourself. I'm like, dude, this is not healthy for me. I don't care what the fuck I say. No, it's not.
Right.
So then getting back in and working out and all these things, I realized, dude, I don't need this anymore. I just need to go to the gym and make sure I'm staying active. That's going to promote life. And as I promote life more now, and I cut out the things that in my mind will, you know, possibly speed up the process of, you know, of ending life or not being healthy, whatever. As I take those things out, now I don't really think about it that much. And it was amazing to me. But how a therapist could not be like, they all don't want to tackle it because they're like, oh, it's a religious thing or this or that or whatever. But really, it's just a simple question. Well, what are you doing in your life that's not promoting the opposite, right? Of
Right.
whatever you're afraid of.
Right. But the beauty thing of what you did, though, is you asked yourself that question, and then you were able to
Right.
flip it. Right.
Yep.
Now I can do things to help promote a healthy life. Right. And make that change. And you said something that was very great. And I was just watching Penn Jillette, who just lost 100 pounds. And he did it by just changing what he eats. And he goes, that sounds easy. It's not. He goes, so I did this for so many days and I did this for so many days. He goes, now I don't even crave the foods that I used to eat. It's like,
right.
It's like it doesn't matter to me anymore. It's like they don't have this pull on me anymore.
Right.
So now I can go and he goes, he goes, you know, and if I want to go out and have, you know, a nice steak or a meal or whatever, I will. You know, it's no big deal, but I don't crave it and it doesn't have that same taste to me that it used to have. So yeah, so that was really cool. You got to experience that.
So yeah, that was an interesting experience. But with that picture, what I find very fascinating is it's interesting because when you have that inner battle going on with yourself, it's about reuniting yourself with the child, right? But when you have a conflict, like in a relationship, what I found from my experience between two people, it comes down to like the mirror effect, right? Or whatever it may be. Like they're showing you your inner child and you're showing them their inner child.
Right.
So in that situation, both adults are like, no, I don't want to see it, whatever, right? So they're back to back. And the kids are like, we're trying to connect.
Right,
you know?
right.
So that's that healing piece. But it's kind of a little bit different than when it's just going on in yourself, from my perspective.
Oh, no. And that's why I always say, like, relationships will really bring your stuff up to the surface or bury it, right? Because you are trying to connect and you have to connect on a different level, right?
Right.
So relationships always bring it up. And that's why I always laugh when people are single and they're like, oh, I'm going to take some time, I'm going to work on myself, which is fantastic. But then you get into a relationship and then you fall back into those old same patterns again, instead of looking like you are to like, what's the cause? What are they showing me about me?
Yeah.
You know, and you can't do that on your own.
No. You have to do it with other people.
Yeah.
Or maybe you can do it on your own, but you just really have to have like I think it will take longer. I think that's what it will take. I think it will take longer, possibly.
I think so, yeah, because you need to be able to know what questions to ask yourself to learn about yourself.
Yeah.
Right? And relationship just kind of speeds that up.
Yeah. And you got to really be ready to be like truly honest with yourself and ready to actually like to break that habit, whatever it may be. Right.
And to be vulnerable, right?
Yeah. And the other thing too, I think like in the journey, I hate the word journey, but in this whatever process, it's like it's just that word journey is being used way too much.
It's okay, I don't like the band either.
Yeah, I'm just like, oh god, okay. But it's look at those things at the time. It might be like the wrong time or whatever it is, you know? It's just, you can see it, and like how we were talking about, it's like, okay, now you know it's there, but it's just not ready to heal. Where before it was like you didn't even know it was there. Now you see it, okay, then it'll come back up again, and then at some point, okay, let's address this, and then you'll kind of just know the time, like, okay, now's the time. And
Yeah,
not beating
it's like
yourself
you
up
said.
about it, you know?
Yeah, it's like you said, right? Take one step, work on that one step. But what everybody wants to do is like run up the stairs, right? But
Yeah,
no, take that step, work on there, and build the foundation for that step so you can take the next step.
yeah. And I was watching this jiu-jitsu video, and this guy had a great quote. I forgot who it was, so I can't give credit to it, but this is not mine. But it was, the right move at the wrong time is the wrong move.
Right.
So it's just like you could have everything executed perfect in your form, everything, but if the timing isn't there, not going to work.
Not going to work. Again, it could
Yeah,
actually be putting you in a bad position, right? In jiu-jitsu.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And I think the same thing can apply to life as well. So it's
Mm-hmm.
all just kind of figuring it out along the way.
Well, that's the beauty of sports, right? It's a microcosm of life, right? It's life sped up,
Yeah.
right?
And speaking about the inner child, I had an interesting question. So I hear like on the radio, I don't watch a lot of sports, but I hear about like players getting upset on the field, different things like that. And then it kind of made me start thinking like, when these players go out there, a lot of times they've been playing their whole life, right? So are they playing from the present moment, or are they playing as themselves as like a 13-year-old kid, a 15-year-old kid, a 20-year-old kid?
That's
Kind of
it.
interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. It's also interesting too. Is well, since you use you do jujitsu, we use an example for you to see if you can connect it, because I have parts of games where I don't remember anything. And I just saw an interview with Franco Harris, who had the immaculate reception that won the game for Pittsburgh way back. I think it was 30 years ago now. And they're like, "What do you remember about that play?" He goes, "Absolutely nothing. I don't remember anything." And it's so true when you're in that moment, you're in that sport, you don't remember anything. That's why I'm always fascinated when they talk to the athlete after the game, like, "Hey, in this moment, what were you thinking?" And they tell them. I'm like, "Wow, that's amazing. Like, how do you do that?" Because once I had the ball in my
Yeah.
head, nothing else mattered.
Yep.
So in jiu-jitsu, you might get put in a position that's very vulnerable, or you're going to get choked out. Do you remember that and what to do? I know the masters do, right? They were able to slow it down and go, "No, just do this."
Yeah. At the point in the game where I'm at now, I pretty much remember it all, and it's kind of like, it's funny because you get to the point to where like they think they're in the advantage, but little do they know I put them into that position. I'm already 2 steps ahead of them.
Right.
So
Right.
they
So
think like they're in a better position.
let's make some clarity here, Nick, just because we are recording this and some other people might see
Yeah,
it. We'll see. You are now a black belt.
correct.
Right.
Yeah. With perception and the way that I went about the game as a purple belt, 4 years ago compared, or actually like 6 years ago compared to now, very, very different.
Right.
Very different.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've worked with every belt in jiu-jitsu, and you can almost just by listening to them what belt they are.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
That's definitely true.
Yeah, so you can hear the calmness that Nick is talking about this with, because now he's elevated to that level. Yeah. Yeah, it's really fascinating.
Yeah, I think that goes with all sports, and I think that goes with like life also. Because if you talk to somebody who's in their 60s, 70s, usually they don't care what anybody else thinks. They're very confident in themselves. They've been through a lot of shit in their lives, and they're still here. So, I mean, it's pretty impressive.
It is. It is. And then
Like
you have
when
the
you see
20-year-old
them,
life coaches.
yeah, exactly. It's like, wow, you're really a badass. Like that's what I see when I see an older person. You know, it's like they're still moving along, doing their thing, and it's just like, wow, that's awesome.
Right? And they're fascinating to talk to,
Oh yeah,
to get their life
stories. I mean, they
experience.
can give you so much wisdom, knowledge, and it's really cool.
Yeah. But as a young teenager, they're like, oh, I know everything. And they don't know anything. They're old,
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, now the kids, they're teenagers, so they know everything. I know nothing. This and that. So it's like, okay.
Right.
But it's funny because then it brings up in me, like when I was, oh, okay, I remember when I told that to my parents. And now I look back and I see, okay, I see what they were trying to do there. Okay, that makes sense, etc. So,
See, that's a fascinating
yeah,
relationship there too, to learn that aspect of it as well. That, like we were talking about
right,
earlier with interpersonal relationships, but now the parent, and now you're becoming the parent.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and just as there's no book for parenting, there's no book for life either. It's just like, that's the biggest thing I think is just to like listen to yourself in a way, learn from others, and just be guided by like what's inside of you, and really not everybody knows what's going on. Like I said, you can lie to everybody else, but you can't lie to yourself. It's just, you can't do it. So just be when you're honest with yourself. You don't even have to be honest with yourself in front of other people. That's really really hard to do. So at least just be honest with yourself at some point in your day, in your life, whatever it may be.
That's a great point, Nick. And I find that a lot of people aren't really truthful with themselves. What are some
Mm-hmm.
ways that you do that or interact with being truthful with yourself?
It just comes down to, I think it comes down to the timing aspect. Like when you in exposure to something, and you got to want to make a change. I think that's the most important thing. So you got to set a goal, okay, and then like from that goal, then you set like little things along the way that can make you get there. So for example, since we're going to use jiu-jitsu, we're going to talk, I'm just going to use jiu-jitsu for an example, okay. So if my goal is to win, is to not get submitted or to get a sweep or to get a certain submission, what I do is I break down what I need. So I know, okay, if if I get grips and I make these grips count, and I'm always like doing, let me think how to explain this exactly. So so if somebody gets on top of me in the mount position, okay, I know if my elbows are touching the floor and are at my side, I know that there's no way this person can move their knees up and get into an arm lock or some kind of more advanced attack. So instead of just worrying about like I'm going to get out the mount, I'm just going to worry about I just need to get my elbows down to my side. That's it.
Mm.
Now, how can that translate into life, right? So, say for instance, if I'm like having a rough time down in the dumps or something like that, and my end goal is I just want to be happy, which is a whole other topic on itself. But we'll just say I'm trying to cheer up. I want to be happy. Well, my goal is just to smile. That's it. I'm gonna smile today, and even if like I don't see someone or something to make me smile, I'm just gonna force myself to hold the smile for 1 minute, and I'll do a timer. Boom, 1 minute, and I'll just put a smile on my face. It'll be fake as fuck, but I am putting a smile
Right.
on my face. Hey, okay. But what it's gonna do is now my brain's gonna be like, it's okay to smile. You can smile,
Right.
and then by doing that, eventually you'll start. Oh wow, my day wasn't as bad. It's easier to smile than frown, right? So they say. So it's just kind of the little steps that you can put in place. Or
Right.
I'm gonna do one nice thing for somebody today, right? You don't have to be like go out and do all this charity work and all these things. It's like just do something small. I'm gonna hold the door for one person today. That's it.
Right.
But
So
then it will be interesting because from that good deed, then all of a sudden it'll start bringing a little bit more happiness in you, you know?
Yeah.
And then by smiling, now I'm smiling and now I'm doing a good deed. Oh, okay. Now I'm going to start promoting more of that happiness factor.
Yeah, was it Jim Valvano, right? What do you say? If you laugh, you cry. I think smile. I can't remember. It was like three things. It's like that's a full day. That's a full day.
Yeah.
That's a great day.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know?